high rigidity and low rigidity if you were macro dieting. So in the case that you have a low rigidity macro target based diet, you have the flexibility to hit your daily macros without strict rules. And this is largely what I follow. Like, y'all hate me. Like, I'll wake up and be like, okay, like I'm generally going to eat the same foods because I know these foods are satiating. And I also know the portion sizes that I should eat generally to not be excessive or not put myself in a bunch later in the day where now I only have like protein to hit and it's like 90 grams and it's like 6 p.m. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, those are all very adolescent, very immature macro dieting type mistakes that you learn from, you should learn from, hopefully. But even with low rigidity, that's essentially waking up and being like, hey, I'm not as hungry today. I'm not going to train as hard. So maybe my breakfast isn't going to be as hefty. Maybe I'm going to break it up into smaller meals throughout the day. Or I'm going to be really busy. You know what? I'm actually going to be on a plane for like 8 hours today, or like total travel time at 8 hours. So I'm not going to eat a lot because I'm going to be sitting and like the food's going to be shit anyway. It's not stuff I really enjoy. So what I'm going to do instead, I'm going to eat before my flight and I'm going to eat after my flight. And I'm just going to very fiscally responsibly budget these targets based according to what I should do. So it's really like more the honor standard. And I'll say there are a lot of benefits to this, which I'm going to go through each like type of person that I think would benefit from different types of approaches with different levels of rigidity. But just for definition's sake, like even for low rigidity, macro-based like dieting, this could incorporate small deviations of like 5 to 10 grams over or under. Now, if you're constantly going 5 grams over, your calories are higher. So, I mean, that's okay, but just we know exactly like why maybe weight isn't moving down as fast, especially if you're doing 10 grams and you're doing it across fats, carbs, proteins. Typically for deviations around fats, I'm like, hey, we shouldn't really see that. And if you're over like 10 grams, tomorrow you should pull like 10 grams from it. Like, we should be aiming for a steady weekly balance, especially with this kind of flexibility. But even with these small deviations, adherence is still considered high or 100%. There are no restrictions on meal timing or food choices. And this is one, again, like it should be adhered to with a reasonable sense of responsibility. So like, I don't have a lot of clients who do this and they're just children about it. They're just like, oh, I had like protein shakes all throughout the day, or I just had chicken and lettuce and then I had a giant meal later that night with a bunch of junk food. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, that is a very, like, I would say adolescent way to go about eating. And if performance is your goal, then we need to consider how nutrient timing blends to performance. So we need to have a specific amount of carbs and fats and protein before and after training. And this might not even be like a strict like line in the sand that I'm like, you need to have 20% of your carbs both before and then 20% after your training. I might not do that because with some people it just doesn't matter and they're not that hungry, so it really doesn't matter, because it's like, okay, this is more of a pain than anything to get them to do this at 4:30 in the morning. But that is like the lowest end of the rigidity spectrum within macro dieting. Is there's no nutrient timing requirements. Food choices are fairly flexible. For my clients, like the understanding is like, if you're not losing weight, we got to take a closer look at food. And if you're eating a bunch of shit, like if you're eating a bunch of junk, I'm going to talk to you about it. I'm not going to be mean because I like junk food too. Like, I get it. Okay. But I am going to be honest and be like, hey, I think this could be an area. It's an opportunity, if anything, for us to clean this up so that you can see more progress on the scale and feel better about what we're doing. Now, high rigidity, the other end of the spectrum, you are required to hit your macros precisely. There are specific macro targets per each meal. There are probably meal timing like specifics. Is like, hey, this needs to be 30 minutes before your workout, 30 minutes after. Food choices are limited. It's very clear that like, hey, I don't want you eating more than 10% of junk or whatever your calories are. Substitutions are restricted. So like generally saying like, hey, I'm not cool with you opting out of your vegetables to have more cereal later. And then there are also minimum micronutrient intake requirements. So nutrient timing is essential. Specific meals are eaten at specific times, often tied around training. And this is where I think it can get like overly rigid, because a lot of people will be like, yo, like I'm not hungry around these meals that you have that are like perpetually larger and larger, but I am hungry late at night. And that's where I think we have to respect like, hey, this could be optimal on paper, and this could be great for glucose management, but how much of a difference does it make if this is adding a ton of stress at the end of the day, and then this person is waking up starving? They're like barely able to stay adherent. They're also finding they're just like, yo, I don't even enjoy these meals because it's just not aligned with my natural hunger signaling. Also, then I feel bloated during training, and then I just like get in my head about it, There are specific requirements, and the degree of rigidity can vary. That's what I'm trying to say.